I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Tasha. And I love you. 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 Tasha.
Hey fellow knitters, welcome to my joining series. In this episode I'm going to show you how to graft two pieces of knitting together or join two pieces of knitting using the Kitchener stitch. The Kitchener stitch is a way to create a seamless or invisible joint or seam when joining two or more pieces of work. It's typically used with socks. So when you make socks, the Kitchener stitch is often used. It's a sewn joining method, and basically, as you can see here, I've used it for the borders. So these right here are individual squares that were knitted prior, and then what I did was I actually created knitted borders, and what you're doing is you're knitting the border on each side and then joining them in the middle using the Kitchener stitch and creating that additional ridge. In this case, there are 7 ridges here for each of these. So basically you're knitting 3.5 ridges on one and then 3 ridges on the other, and then the sewn Kitchener stitch is that other half, or that additional row of knitting that creates, because it takes 2 rows to create a ridge. And as you can see, there's no way of telling, even on the back you can't even see where the seam is. You can use this method for you can join basically any 2 pieces of work that have live stitches on them. Now, as you can see here, there are no live stitches on this square, so I have to create the live stitches by working up the border. So I've already done that on one piece, or one square. I've created half of the ridges, and this is the one that actually has the 3.5 ridges or 7 rows on it, and on this one I'll be creating a total of 6 rows or 3 ridges, and then when you graft them together using the Kitchener stitch, that will create that additional row that will do that. So the first thing you want to do is you want to, in this particular case, because I don't have any live stitches, you want to pick up stitches in your work. And typically you pick them up on the bind off edge. That's what I did on here. Now, when picking up stitches on the bind off edge, you typically do want to go through with your needle both legs of that bind off stitch. So don't just go through one like that, but actually go through both legs and then pick up your stitch that way. And so what I'm doing is I'm picking up a total of 44 stitches on this particular square to match the 44 stitches that were picked up on this square here and then knitted up. So I'm going to continue picking up these stitches, and then what I'm going to do is actually knit, in this particular case, we did 7 rows here, I'm going to knit 6 rows on here, and then when I come back I'll show you how to get things started to do the actual Kitchener stitch. Do keep in mind that when you are picking up your stitches, the stitches that you pick up do not count as your first row, just like they do not when you cast stitches on. So you can think of it that way. So after you pick up 44 stitches, when you turn your work and begin knitting, that actually is your first row for counting purposes. Okay everyone, so I'm back, and this is the top piece that I was working on. The bottom piece I'd already done. So the bottom piece has the 3.5 ridges or 7 rows, and then the top piece has 3 ridges or 6 rows. And the way you want this is you want them so that the needles are pointed in the same direction, or to the right, and then you also want to hold them wrong side to wrong side. So this is the wrong side. These right here are the backs. And then you want to put them together like that. So you've got the right side of the top piece and the right side of the bottom piece. And of course, in order to do that and have the needles pointed the same way, you have to have 7 rows in the bottom and 6 rows. If you try to do 6 rows and 6 rows, they would be pointed in opposite directions with that scheme required of back to back. The other thing too is this is actually the tail to the top piece, and your tail for the top piece that you're going to be working with should be 3 to 4 times the length of your work to ensure that you'll cover the span. I've done this several times, and it seems like for this one 3 times the length works just fine, and still gives you plenty of tail left over to weave in. So you will have to weave in ends at the end. There will be a total of 4. Right now on this bottom piece there are 2 right here that I will weave in later, and then of course there's 1 tail on the opposite end of the top piece that will be woven in. Of course this, once it ends up over here, will also be woven in. So you want to hold your pieces together. To me it's kind of like holding chopsticks in my left hand. I'm right-handed. And then of course you will need a tapestry needle, and then what you need to do is you need to do a setup on the end, and the way the setup works, make sure that your tail that you're working with is on the top, or coming from the top needle. So I usually hold this tail here down, and then what you're going to do is with your tapestry needle you're going to go in to this first stitch here purlwise. You may have to loosen it a little, and that's fine, but once you get it in there, just make sure that you're tightening it and then holding it down. Okay, so you put it in purlwise. Do not remove this stitch from the needle. And then at the top, you're going to go in knitwise. And you'll see why that is in a moment. Anytime you go in doing that pattern, you never slip those stitches off. So when you go in purlwise here and knitwise here, the stitches always stay on the needle. And then you do the opposite when you're taking stitches off of your needles, and I'll show you that next. Alright, so we've got the setup for that first one, and now we're ready to begin. So it's a total of 4, it's a pattern of 4 is what you're doing. And so I always do, instead of doing 4 individual ones, I kind of do 2 at the same time. And so the way that you do that, and always hold this first one, because when you work with the first one, this will come loose unless you hold it down. So what you're going to do is you're going to knit off this bottom one on your bottom needle, knit that off, and then you're going to go in purlwise to the next stitch, but do not take that off, just like we did for the setup. We didn't take it off. And then we're going to work on the top needle now. The top needle, you purl off that next stitch, and then you go in knitwise to the next stitch, just like we did for the setup, but do not take it off of the needle. Of course, make sure, because these will try to wrap around your knitting needles, make sure they are clear and that you don't end up looping on an additional stitch. So that was the 4, so now we're just going to repeat that. So the bottom one, knit that off like that, and then go in purlwise to the next stitch, but do not take that off of your needle. And make sure you pull clear any tails that might accidentally or inadvertently get caught in your stitches that you're actually sewing in. Alright, and then you come up and then you purl off this next one and then go in knitwise to the next stitch, but do not take that off of your needle. Just go in like that. Pull it through. Of course, you want to make sure you're going through that stitch and not through the bottom, what's underneath of it, because then you're missing the stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete this or go all the way down, and when I come back I'll show you what the finished piece looks like. But you can see already the ridge. Okay, so I'm almost at the end here. Just got the last couple of stitches left. And you just keep following through your pattern until all the stitches are off of your needles, observing the pattern. And then what I do is I just put this to the back, and of course this is where we weave this in. So now at this point you just weave in all your ends, and as you can see you've got your 7 ridges. So that is the Kitchener stitch. That's how you join or graft together two pieces of knitting, grafting the live stitches together. Thank you for watching my video, and be sure to subscribe to my channel. I have several knitting videos out there. This is part of the joining series, as I said. The others that you'll find in this series are the mattress stitch, which is another sewn seamless method of joining your work. So again, thank you for watching.